So if you're having troubles where you're itchy all the time, it can be a little bit maddening. And it can be really confusing because there's a variety of issues that can cause this symptom, and they'll be different from person to person. It appears that there's even psychological issues that can create these types of symptoms. And I've even heard directly from people who had their doctor tell them, oh, we don't see anything wrong, it's probably just in your head. Well, I think if I was itching all the time and somebody told me it was just in my head, I'd probably tell them some other words that were in my head. So in this video, I want to give you some insights to understand some of the underlying causes that can create this trouble to see if you can create some improvement for yourself. Let's jump in.
TC Hale is not a doctor and does not claim to be a doctor or licensed in any type of medical field. Don't be an idiot and use anything heard on the show as medical advice. This information should be used for educational purposes only, and you should contact your doctor for any medical advice. Now get off me.
So I'm not a doctor, I'm not giving you any advice because I don't know your situation, but if I can help you understand some of the issues that can create this itchiness all the time, or pruritus as it's called, then that can give you some insights into the right questions you might want to ask your doctor and the right things you might want to dig deeper into. And I kind of put hives into this category too, and they're not really the same thing, but you see them linked together a lot. And when we start digging into this pruritus issue, the associations we see are that people seem to think that it's very common with liver and kidney disease, also low iron levels and those types of anemia where the serum ferritin is very low. There's a lot of data about that, and I'll put links in the description below to some of these studies that I found. Some medications can create these symptoms, and you also see a lot of associations between like gallstones and heartburn or GERD. And GERD is a type of heartburn situation, reflux stuff going on. But to throw you off and to help you understand how varied this can be from person to person, I've even heard from a client that we had a really hard time correcting this issue for her. And when we talk about the most common underlying cause, for a lot of people, I've seen them fix this quite quickly when they fix this problem. But for this client, we just couldn't figure out what was causing it. And then she found something where somebody says, hey, if you're taking your shower too hot and too long, it can create itchy skin. Maybe it's drying out the skin with that heat and this longer shower time. And she stopped taking long, hot showers, and it just stopped for her. So just know that it may take you some effort to figure out what's going on for you and the right step for you, but know that it's always something's going on. So the other thing that we really want to understand when we're looking at all these issues is that the skin is a detoxification organ. And the liver and the kidneys are the big players when it comes to detoxification, but the skin has the ability to help out, and the lungs even can a little bit. So when we're looking at why would the skin be irritated, we have to think about, well, what is the skin trying to push out? Are there troubles going on where maybe there's too many toxins coming in? Or maybe the body's having a hard time getting rid of toxins, and so the body's like, well, what else can I do? I'll just push it out through the pores in the skin, and when those pores get clogged or irritated, it has the ability to create skin problems like acne, rashes, or even itching. And another thing we want to look at is you also hear a lot about pruritus of pregnancy and pruritus of cholestasis. And cholestasis is just an issue where our bile is this soapy substance that's made by the liver, and then it's stored in the gallbladder, and it comes down into the digestive tract and helps us digest our food. It helps us emulsify dietary fats and access all of our fat-soluble vitamins, so it can be very important to the whole digestive process. But when this bile becomes too thick and sticky, or maybe a person isn't producing enough bile, they can create this cholestasis issue. And when this becomes severe, it can also affect how the liver is performing. And how the liver is performing can also affect this cholestasis issue. So it seems to be a problem, but an interesting fact that I'll put in the link in the description below is I found that with cholestatic liver disease, that 80 to 100% of the people dealing with this issue reported that they were dealing with pruritus. 80 to 100%. When is 80 to 100% of people going to report anything with a condition? It almost never happens. So I feel like that's a really big piece of information that we really should not ignore. So to understand how this can create itching trouble, we need to understand that up here is where the liver is, and the liver makes this bile, and then the bile comes down this biliary pathway and it gets stored here in the gallbladder. But it's really common nowadays for a bile to become too thick and sticky to flow correctly. So then it doesn't flow down here and we get that cholestasis issue where the bile just isn't moving. And we'll talk about some reasons that this can happen here in a second, but what's important to understand is that we know the liver filters all these toxins and junk out of the body. It's the body's main detoxification organ. And what a lot of people don't know is the liver puts a lot of that filth and toxins into the bile. So the bile comes down here into the gallbladder, and then after we eat food and it gets acidified and it comes down here, that's when the gallbladder squirts this bile down to help neutralize the acids that leave the stomach, but also help us emulsify those dietary fats and access all those fat-soluble vitamins and really break our food down. So then the bile with the food that we ate goes through the intestinal tract and gets carried through there, so that bile is carrying all those toxins through the intestinal tract. And then we poop like a champion and all the toxins go out the back door. That's the body's main detox pathway. So if bile is too thick and sticky to flow correctly, it's not going to come down here. It's not going to carry all the toxins that the liver put into it. All those toxins are not going to go through the intestinal tract, and they're not going to go out the back door. So now what happens to them? Where do they go? Well, a lot of people feel like, well, this cholestasis issue with the pruritus can be caused because the bile is not flowing. So then when too much bile is in that blood, then it goes into those tissues, and bile is like this soapy substance that emulsifies our fats for us. So that type of soapy substance has the ability to irritate the tissues in the skin and can create that itching issue. Now, I buy into that. I'm like, yeah, I can see where that could happen. But I also feel like it might be more common that this detox pathway is blocked up, and the body trying to push things out through the skin could be part of that itching issue for a lot of people. Maybe if the liver's really gone downhill, it can't produce that bile, and that's why bile isn't moving through. But it seems a little more rare to see someone who's not producing enough bile. It seems very common to see people whose bile has become too thick and sticky to flow correctly. So here are some issues that seem to have the ability to thicken up that bile for some people. And consuming too many grains is one of those. That's a pretty common thing today. What we call a catabolic imbalance, where during the day at the cellular level the body kind of breaks itself down so that it can be rebuilt and renewed, and then at night we move into the anabolic state where the body rebuilds and repairs and is really good at sleeping and resting. But some people seem to get stuck in one of those states, and if someone seems to be stuck in a catabolic state, then that seems to have the ability to thicken up that bile. And we'll put a link in the description below for our video on understanding a catabolic imbalance if you want to dig a little bit more into that. But some more common causes are high estrogen. Estrogen going too high has the ability to thicken up the bile. And estrogen going high is very common. Estrogen is a stress hormone. And if a person is stressed or if their body is stressed, it can raise those stress hormones, and it has the ability to thicken up that bile. There's also a lot of medications that have the ability to raise estrogen levels, and we see here that we know that some medications have the ability to create this type of symptom. Also, hypochlorhydria seems to be a problem, and that's low stomach acid. And it seems very common today for someone not to be making enough stomach acid. And the reason that this can be problematic for as far as the bile goes is because this food coming into the stomach and acidifying, that's what it's supposed to do so that we can break the food down and get the nutrients out of that food. If you're not acidifying the food correctly, you're not really getting all the nutrients out of the food that you're eating. So once the food is acidified and it comes down here into the duodenum, that's what triggers this bile to get squirted down from the gallbladder. Now, consuming dietary fats also has the ability to trigger the gallbladder to squirt some bile down to help emulsify those fats a little bit. But the big player is the stomach acid. It's this acidic stuff coming into the duodenum that triggers this to happen. So if someone's not really making enough stomach acid, they're not acidifying their food correctly, then there's no acidic trigger to make this to come down. And one of the gallbladder's jobs is to concentrate that bile so that it can be more effective. So if it's not being called on, then it's just going to continue to concentrate until it concentrates into sludge or even gallstones. And that kind of brings us back to where we see this correlation between gallstones and the pruritus thing? Well, the gallstones have the ability to block that duct so things can't flow down and the bile can't really move. But if somebody has gallstones, then a lot of times that bile is becoming too thick and sludgy to really flow even before they turn into stones. And this may also help us understand why we see heartburn and GERD so common. That's usually caused by a lack of stomach acid. That's why we get that reflux. There's a valve at the bottom of the esophagus called the lower esophageal sphincter that's supposed to close once the food comes in so things don't reflux back up. But that valve is triggered by stomach acid. If this is new information for you, we'll put a link in the description below for our video on why do I have acid reflux. And that'll help you understand that a little bit more. But it's this lack of acid that creates that. And remember, if there's not enough acid, then we're not going to trigger that bile to come down and flow and help take all the toxins that the liver filtered out the back door. And a couple more interesting things is when we look at this, low iron issues, well, in order to access the minerals in the food that we're eating, we need stomach acid to be working correctly and bile flow. It's that acidic product meeting that alkaline bile product. When those opposite pHs collide, it creates like this sizzle that really helps us bust the food apart and get all the minerals and nutrients out of that food. So a lot of people that don't have enough iron in the system just don't have the ability to get it out of the food that they're eating. We know that if someone's a vegan, maybe they're not eating enough animal protein, that iron can go low, but it can also go low if someone just can't digest the protein correctly. You need to digest it to get those nutrients and minerals out of that food. So it's interesting that we see that correlation, and maybe there's something with the low iron that can create this itchy problem. It seems to be a very common thing to see low iron with the pruritus, but maybe it's just that they can't digest well enough to get the iron out of their food. It's also interesting that with this pruritus of pregnancy, it seems very common that it's most prevalent in that third trimester. Well, the third trimester is when this estrogen goes the highest. So is it the high estrogen that's blocking the bile from flowing correctly and creating this problem, especially in the third trimester? I don't know. I mean, it sure seems like that could be an issue. So what you can look at is you can look to see, do I have other signs that maybe my bile is not flowing correctly? And some of the most common signs are a light colored stool, like your stool is lighter than the color of corrugated cardboard. Maybe a loose stool. And a person is not going to usually experience all of these things, but if any of these things are showing up, it can be a sign that bile is not flowing correctly, and you might want to take some steps to improve that situation. Blood pressure either going too high or too low can be a sign of poor bile flow because that bile is involved in the digestive process. Then minerals might be going too low, which is causing blood pressure to go too low. Or maybe the bile isn't flowing well enough to detox correctly and junk is accumulating in the system and thickening up that blood and raising the pressure needed to push that blood through the system. So blood pressure in either direction could be a problem. If someone has nausea a lot, that can be a sign. If they have trouble digesting dietary fats, that's a strong sign that bile is not flowing correctly. And I don't know why you guys didn't tell me I put blood pressure on there twice. Blood pressure. I don't know. We'll just leave that one off. But all of those are signs. There's other signs. We'll put a link in the description below for our video on 10 signs of poor bile flow so you can dig into that if you feel that that's important. But what's important to understand is that there's a variety of issues that can create this symptom, and there's one problem with the bile flow issue that seems to be most common when it comes to this, but I've also seen people where that wasn't the problem. So try not to get too frustrated with yourself and allow yourself to dig into what may be creating the issue for you so you can create some relief. Now, if you want to learn more how to fix those digestive malfunctions, my book, Kick Your Fat in the Nuts, chapters 3 and 4, walks you through figuring out are there aspects of digestion that are not working correctly and what steps might help you correct those. And the book is available on Amazon, but I'm going to put a link in the description below where you can get the whole book totally for free, and you can just jump to chapters 3 and 4, and that'll walk you through that process. And if you already feel like maybe you do have some bile flow issues because maybe some of these symptoms are showing up for you, then you can jump over right now and check out our video on 5 steps to improve bile flow to gain some insights on some steps that you can start taking to see, does that improve your bile flow and does that have the ability to create some relief for these symptoms for you? I can't wait to hear about your results.